Lieutenant Commander Jake "SharE" Morrison ran his pre-flight checks for the third time that morning, his gloved hands moving with practiced efficiency across the cockpit controls of his FA-18 Super Hornet. The early dawn sky over the Pacific was painted in shades of orange and deep purple, the kind of morning that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with flying 15 years ago. At 38, Morrison was one of the most experienced pilots on the USS Ronald Reagan, with over 2,000 flight hours and 2 deployments under his belt. "SharE, you're clear for launch," crackled the voice of Lieutenant Rodriguez through his helmet speakers. "Roger that, tower. SharE is ready to dance," Morrison replied, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline as the catapult officer signaled him forward. The carrier's deck crew worked around him like a choreographed ballet, each person knowing their role perfectly. The catapult fired. Morrison's body pressed back into his seat as the Super Hornet rocketed from 0 to 165 miles per hour in less than 2 seconds. The sudden transition from the carrier deck to open air never got old. His aircraft climbed smoothly, banking away from the massive carrier that looked increasingly like a toy boat on the endless blue below. "Beautiful morning for a flight, SharE," came the voice of his wingman, Lieutenant Melissa "Viper" Torres, pulling up alongside him in her own Hornet. "Best office in the world, Viper," Morrison grinned beneath his oxygen mask. Their mission was routine, a standard reconnaissance patrol along the carrier group's perimeter, checking for any unusual surface or air activity. Nothing glamorous, nothing dangerous. Just another day keeping watch over international waters. Morrison had done this flight pattern dozens of times. He knew every checkpoint, every turn, every radio call. They climbed to 28,000 feet, where the air was thin and cold, and the curve of the Earth became visible on the horizon. Morrison loved this altitude, high enough to see the world in perspective, but not so high that you lost connection with the ocean below. The Pacific stretched in every direction, an endless expanse of deep blue occasionally broken by white caps. "Home plate, this is SharE. Passing checkpoint Alpha, all systems green," Morrison reported, his eyes scanning his instruments. "Fuel, optimal. Hydraulics, normal. Radar, clear. Everything exactly as it should be." "Roger, SharE. Continue on heading 270. Weather's clear for the next 100 miles," responded Petty Officer Sarah Chen from the carrier's communications center. Morrison had met Chen briefly during a safety briefing. She was sharp, detail-oriented, the kind of person who caught problems before they became emergencies. Her voice over the radio was always calm and professional. 30 minutes into the flight, Morrison and Torres separated to cover more ground, staying within visual range but spreading their radar coverage. Morrison's eyes moved constantly, outside to scan the horizon, inside to monitor his instruments, a rhythm as natural as breathing. That's when he noticed it. A slight flicker on his heads-up display, just for a second then gone. Morrison frowned. Probably nothing, a glitch, maybe a loose connection. He tapped the glass of his fuel gauge. The needle bounced slightly but settled back to normal. "Home plate, this is SharE. All systems green, beginning." The static hit like a physical wall. Morrison's entire instrument panel erupted in chaos. The heads-up display went completely black. His fuel gauge spun wildly. The altimeter climbed and dropped randomly, showing impossible readings. The radar screen filled with white noise. Every warning light in the cockpit blazed red simultaneously. "Home plate, do you copy?" Morrison's voice was steady, but his heart rate spiked. He'd trained for instrument failure, but never all at once. "Home plate, this is SharE. I'm experiencing complete system failure. Do you copy?" Nothing, not even static now, just dead silence in his headset. Morrison's hands moved automatically, following years of training. Try the backup radio. Dead. Try the emergency frequency. Dead. He flipped switches, reset circuit breakers, went through emergency protocols he'd memorized years ago. Nothing responded. Outside his canopy, the world looked normal. Blue sky above, darker blue ocean below. But inside his cockpit, every system that connected him to the outside world had gone dark. He was alone at 28,000 feet with no communication, no reliable instruments, and no way to call for help. His training kicked in. Stay calm, assess the situation, don't panic. But underneath the training, a colder thought crept in. He was 200 miles from the carrier, over some of the deepest water in the Pacific, and as far as anyone knew, he just vanished from the sky. 200 miles away on the USS Ronald Reagan, Petty Officer Sarah Chen stared at her radar screen in disbelief. One moment, Morrison's transponder signal had been bright and clear. The next moment, nothing. Just empty ocean where a $70 million fighter jet and one of their best pilots had been seconds before. "Say again, Shark. You're breaking up," Chen transmitted, her voice still calm but her hand gripping the microphone tighter. "Silence. Shark, this is home plate. Do you copy?" Still nothing. Chen's stomach dropped. She switched frequencies, trying every channel. Nothing. She looked at her supervisor, Petty Officer Martinez, who was already moving toward her station. "What happened?" Martinez demanded. "He's gone. Lieutenant Commander Morrison just disappeared off radar," Chen said, her fingers flying over her console, trying to re-establish contact. Martinez grabbed the phone to the bridge. "Captain Rodriguez, we have a situation. Shark is off radar. No transponder, no radio contact. Last known position 200 miles northeast." On the bridge, Captain Rodriguez gripped the railing, his weathered face hardening. He'd been in the Navy for 30 years and had lost pilots before. Each one was like losing a piece of himself. "Sound general quarters. Launch search and rescue. Get every helicopter we have in the air. Find our pilot," Rodriguez ordered, his voice carrying across the bridge. Alarms began to wail throughout the carrier. Crew members ran to their stations. Helicopter crews sprinted to their aircraft. The entire massive ship transformed from routine operations to emergency rescue in under 3 minutes. But 200 miles away, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was alone in the sky, his radio silent, his instruments lying to him, and the Pacific Ocean waiting far below. He had no way of knowing that help was already scrambling. And he had no way of knowing that in 30 minutes, an impossible voice would cut through the silence, calling his name. 30 minutes felt like 30 hours in the carrier's communication center. Petty Officer Sarah Chen had tried every frequency, every protocol, every trick she'd learned in 6 years of naval communications. Nothing. Lieutenant Commander Morrison remained silent, and with each passing minute, the knot in her stomach tightened. The communication center hummed with tense activity. 3 other specialists worked adjacent stations, coordinating with the search and rescue helicopters now racing toward Morrison's last known position. The wall of screens before them showed weather patterns, satellite imagery, and radar sweeps of empty ocean. Chen rubbed her tired eyes. She'd been staring at the same static-filled channels for so long that they'd started to blur together. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but she didn't dare leave her post. Somewhere out there, Shark was alone, possibly injured, possibly. No, she pushed that thought away. Morrison was one of the best. If anyone could handle an emergency, it was him. Her headset suddenly crackled. Chen sat up straight, her hand instinctively reaching for the volume control. The static cleared, replaced by something she'd never heard before on a military frequency, perfect, crystalline silence. Not the absence of signal, but the presence of something cutting through all interference. Then came the voice. "Navy pilot Shark." Chen's blood turned to ice. The voice was female, calm, measured, and completely impossible. It transmitted on Morrison's encrypted squadron channel, a frequency that required military-grade encryption keys that were changed daily. No civilian equipment could access it. No foreign military should be able to access it. Navy pilot SharE, do not adjust your heading. Help is coming. The transmission ended as abruptly as it began. The static returned, then faded back to normal background noise. Chen's hands trembled over her keyboard. Did anyone else hear that? She called out to the other specialists. Petty Officer Jackson spun in his chair. Hear what? The transmission, female voice on SharE's encrypted channel. Jackson shook his head. I didn't hear anything. What frequency? Chen pulled up her logs, her heart racing. There it was, a 15-second transmission spike on Morrison's channel, clear as day in the data. But if Jackson hadn't heard it on his headset. Lieutenant Martinez, Chen's voice cut through the controlled chaos. I need you to hear something. Martinez crossed to her station in 3 strides. Chen played back the recording. The woman's voice filled her headset again, that same unsettling calm. Navy pilot SharE, do not adjust your heading. Help is coming. Martinez's face went pale. Play it again. Chen did, then again, then a 4th time. Get Captain Rodriguez down here. Now, Martinez ordered, his voice tight. 5 minutes later, Captain Rodriguez stood in the communications center, listening to the playback for the 6th time. His jaw was clenched so tight Chen could see the muscles working beneath his weathered skin. Analysis, Rodriguez demanded. Chen's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up everything she had. Sir, the transmission came through on a channel that requires rotating military encryption. The encryption key changes every 24 hours. There's no way a civilian should be able to access it. Could it be one of ours? Someone on another ship trying to help? No, sir. I've checked. All our vessels are accounted for, and none report transmitting on this frequency. Besides, the voice doesn't match any personnel in our database. Rodriguez leaned closer to the screen. Where did it originate? Chen had been dreading this question. She pulled up the triangulation data. Sir, based on signal strength and direction, the transmission originated from coordinates in the middle of the ocean, Morrison's last known position. The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of the carrier's engines. That's impossible, Rodriguez said quietly. There's nothing there. No ships, no land, nothing but 4,000 feet of water. I know, sir. Chen's voice was barely a whisper, but the data doesn't lie. Lieutenant Harris, the intelligence officer, pushed through the door, slightly out of breath. Captain, I heard we have a situation. Rodriguez gestured to Chen. Play it for him. Harris listened, his expression growing darker with each word. When it finished, he straightened. That's not possible, our encryption. I know what our encryption is supposed to prevent, Rodriguez cut him off. Obviously, someone found a way through it. The question is who and why. Harris moved to Chen's station, studying the data. Run a voice analysis. Check it against every database we have, friendly and hostile. I want to know if this voice belongs to anyone we know. Already running, sir, Chen said, pulling up the analysis software. The program chewed through the recording, breaking down pitch, cadence, accent patterns, stress markers. After 2 minutes, results began populating the screen. Chen's frown deepened. This is strange. Define strange, Rodriguez said. The voice analysis shows physiological markers consistent with someone under extreme stress, elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, tension in the vocal cords. But the delivery is perfectly calm, almost eerily so. It's like someone who's terrified but trained to suppress it completely. Military training, Harris suggested. Possibly, or medical emergency services, someone used to crisis situations. Chen scrolled through more data. But here's what doesn't make sense. The voice doesn't match anyone in our database. Not U.S. military, not allied forces, not any known hostile operators. Martinez looked at the triangulation map. Could the coordinates be wrong? Could there be a ship out there we don't know about? Chen shook her head. I've pulled satellite imagery from the last 6 hours. There's nothing at those coordinates. No vessels, no debris, nothing. Rodriguez's radio crackled. Captain, this is SharE-1. We're approaching Morrison's last known position. No visual contact yet. Weather's clear, sea state calm. If he's in the water, we should be able to spot him. Copy that, SharE-1. Keep searching, Rodriguez replied. He turned back to the communication team. I want continuous monitoring of all frequencies, if that voice comes back. Chen's screen suddenly flickered. Everyone froze. A new transmission indicator appeared, same frequency, same impossible source coordinates. Chen's hand shot to her headset, turning up the volume. The speakers crackled to life. The same woman's voice, but different now, urgent, stripped of the earlier supernatural calm. He's alive. 13 minutes until critical fuel loss. You're looking in the wrong place. Where? Rodriguez barked at the screen, as if the mysterious woman could hear him. Where should we be looking? But the transmission was already ending. Static filled the channel, then faded back to silence. Chen's hands shook as she typed. Recording captured, running analysis now. 13 minutes, Harris said, checking his watch. If she's right about his fuel, Morrison needs to land in 13 minutes or he's ejecting over open water. Rodriguez grabbed the radio. All SharE units, increase search radius. We have intelligence suggesting the pilot is still airborne with critical fuel shortage. Expand pattern to. Sir, Chen interrupted, her voice tight. The second transmission. The triangulation is more precise this time. I have exact coordinates. She pulled up a map. A red dot pulsed in the middle of empty blue ocean. There's still nothing there, Martinez said, staring at the screen. Satellites show empty water. Then our satellites are wrong or something's blocking them, Rodriguez said grimly. He keyed his radio. SharE-1 new coordinates, proceed to, he read off Chen's data. Maximum speed, we have a possible contact. Chen stared at her screen, at the impossible coordinates, at the voice analysis that showed a woman who shouldn't exist using technology she shouldn't have, knowing things she couldn't possibly know. Who are you? She whispered to the silent radio. 200 miles away, in a cockpit filled with dying instruments and warning lights, Morrison heard nothing but his own breathing and the sound of his aircraft tearing through the sky. He had no idea that on the carrier, his shipmates had just heard a ghost speak his name. And he had no idea that in less than 4 minutes, that same impossible voice would fill his helmet, offering salvation, or leading him to his death. The SH-60 Seahawk helicopter cut through the Pacific air at maximum speed, its rotors beating a thunderous rhythm that drowned out everything else. Lieutenant Commander Frank "Bulldog" Patterson gripped the controls, his eyes scanning the endless blue below. In the 22 years he'd been flying search and rescue, he'd pulled 17 pilots from the ocean. He was determined to make Morrison number 18. SharE-1 approaching new coordinates, Patterson transmitted to the carrier. Still no visual contact. Beside him, rescue swimmer Petty Officer Marcus Webb leaned out the open door, binoculars pressed to his eyes. The ocean stretched beneath them, deceptively peaceful. No debris field, no emergency flares, no bright orange life raft bobbing in the waves. Nothing. There's got to be something, Webb muttered. Planes don't just vanish. But this one had. Patterson checked his instruments for the 100th time. GPS showed they were exactly at the coordinates Chen had transmitted, the spot where the mysterious voice had supposedly originated. The spot where logic said there should be a ship, or a plane, or something to explain the transmission. Instead, there was only water. SharE-1, this is home plate, Chen's voice crackled through Patterson's headset. Confirm you're at the designated coordinates. Affirmative, home plate. We're right on top of them, circling at 500 feet. Visibility is perfect. We can see for miles. There's nothing here. No vessels, no aircraft, no debris, just ocean. Patterson heard the frustration in Chen's responding silence. He understood it. Every minute they searched in the wrong place was a minute Morrison was running out of fuel, running out of options, running out of time. SharE-2 and SharE-3 are expanding the search grid, another helicopter pilot reported. Covering sectors north and east, still negative contact. Patterson banked the Seahawk in a wide circle, dropping to 300 feet. Webb continued scanning, but Patterson could see the concern growing on his rescue swimmer's face. The ocean was telling them a story, and it wasn't a good one. Back on the USS Ronald Reagan, Sarah Chen was living her own nightmare. She sat hunched over her console, headphones clamped to her ears, listening to the mysterious transmission for what must have been the 50th time. Behind her, Lieutenant Harris had commandeered another station and was running every analysis tool the Navy had. "The voice analysis is complete," Harris announced, his voice tight with frustration. "We've compared it against every military database, ours, NATO allies, even some classified foreign intelligence recordings. No match. This woman doesn't exist in any system we have access to." Chen pulled up the waveform analysis on her screen. "Look at this," she said, pointing to irregular patterns in the audio. "These fluctuations, they're not normal radio interference." Harris leaned in. "What am I looking at?" "The signal is being distorted by something between the source and us. See these spikes? That's consistent with electromagnetic interference, but not the kind we usually see. It's almost like the signal is being bent around something." "Bent around what?" Chen shook her head. "I don't know, but whatever's out there is affecting radio waves in ways I've never seen before." Captain Rodriguez appeared at her shoulder. "Theories?" "Sir, I have data but no explanations. The signal is real. We can measure it, analyze it, triangulate it. But the source location is impossible. Satellites show empty ocean. Our search helicopters see empty ocean. Yet the signal is definitely coming from those exact coordinates." Rodriguez stared at the coordinates on the screen. "Could it be underwater, a submarine?" Harris jumped in. "I considered that, sir. But submarines communicate on completely different frequencies, and they can't access our encrypted military channels. Plus, our sonar shows nothing in that area. The ocean floor there is nearly 4,000 feet down. It's a deep trench. No submarine would be operating at that depth." "Then what the hell are we dealing with?" Rodriguez demanded. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Chen's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up more data. "Sir, I've been analyzing the exact wording of the transmissions. Navy pilot SharE, she used his call sign. That's classified information. Only people in his squadron should know it." "Could we have a security breach?" Rodriguez asked. "Possible but unlikely," Harris replied. "Call signs are changed regularly, and they're not stored in any database that could be easily hacked. Someone would need direct access to squadron records from the last 48 hours. Chen's screen suddenly lit up with new data. "Sir, I'm picking up unusual electromagnetic readings from the search area. They're faint, but they're there. Some kind of localized field that's interfering with our equipment." "Define unusual," Rodriguez said. Chen studied the readings, her frown deepening. "It's like, imagine a bubble of electromagnetic energy sitting on the ocean. Radio waves that enter it get distorted. Radar signals bounce off it strangely. It would explain why our satellites might not be showing us everything, why the signal appears to come from nowhere." "Natural phenomenon," Harris suggested. "Maybe. There are underwater volcanic vents in this region. They can release ionized particles that affect electromagnetic fields, but I've never seen readings quite like this." Martinez appeared with a printed satellite image. "Captain, I pulled historical satellite data from the last 72 hours. Look at this." He spread the image on the console. Chen leaned in, her eyes widening. In the satellite infrared imagery from 2 days ago, there was a faint thermal signature at the exact coordinates where the voice had originated, a signature that suggested heated water rising from below. That could be volcanic activity, Chen said. Could that explain our mystery signal? Rodriguez asked. Chen bit her lip. Volcanic vents can create electromagnetic interference, yes, but accessing our encrypted military channels, broadcasting coherent voice messages, that requires technology, not geology. Harris pulled up another screen. I've been researching civilian vessels that were in this region over the last week. There's one possibility, a research vessel registered out of San Diego. The Pacific Explorer, operated by UC San Diego Scripps Institution of Oceanography. It was scheduled to study underwater volcanic activity in this area. Do we have current location on this vessel? Rodriguez demanded. Negative, sir. Last AIS transmission was 73 hours ago, then it went dark. Chen's pulse quickened. Went dark as in turned off their transponder. Apparently. Not uncommon for research vessels when they're doing sensitive work, but the timing is suspicious. Rodriguez grabbed the radio. All SAR units, we have a possible research vessel in your area. Designate Pacific Explorer. Modify search pattern to look for any vessels, not just debris. Patterson's voice crackled back immediately. Homeplate SAR-1. If there's a ship out here, we should be able to see it. We're at 300 feet with unlimited visibility. I'm telling you, there's nothing. He stopped mid-sentence. SAR-1 repeat, Chen transmitted. Silence. Patterson, do you copy? More silence then. Homeplate, this is SAR-1. I'm going to sound crazy, but my instruments just went haywire. All of them at once. GPS is showing impossible coordinates. Altimeter is fluctuating. Radio compass is spinning, but I can still fly the aircraft manually and I can still see clearly. Chen's heart raced. SAR-1, maintain your position. What do you see? That's the thing, Homeplate. I see the same empty ocean I've been seeing for the last 30 minutes, but my instruments are telling me I'm flying through an electrical storm. There's no storm. Sky is clear. But the instruments don't lie except when they do, and I'm not making any sense, am I? Chen looked at Harris, then at Rodriguez. The captain's face had gone pale. He's entered the anomaly, Chen whispered. Whatever's affecting Morrison's plane, the search helicopter just flew into it. SAR-1, this is Captain Rodriguez. Can you maintain control of your aircraft? Affirmative, sir. Flight controls are manual, responding normally. It's just the electronics that are screwy. Pull back to the edge of the anomaly. We need you functional for when we locate Morrison. Roger that, pulling back now. Sir, one more thing. Just before my instruments went crazy, I thought I saw something on the water. Just for a second. Could have been a wave, could have been a reflection, but it looked almost like. Like what, SAR-1? Like a ship, sir. But when I looked again, nothing was there. In the communication center, Chen stared at her screens, at the impossible coordinates, at the voice analysis of a woman who shouldn't exist. Somewhere in that electromagnetic anomaly, Lieutenant Commander Morrison was running out of time. Somewhere in that same impossible space, someone, or something, was calling his name. And 13 minutes had already passed since the last transmission. Chen checked her clock. Morrison's fuel should be critical now. If he was still in the air, he had minutes at most before he'd be forced to eject into the Pacific. Her radio crackled suddenly. Not the search helicopters, not the carrier's tower, a different frequency. The woman's voice returned, but this time it wasn't calm or urgent. It was commanding, powerful, cutting through static like a knife through fog. Navy pilot SharE is beginning his descent. You have 10 minutes to penetrate the electromagnetic field. After that, you won't find him. The transmission ended. Chen's hands gripped her console. She's talking to him, right now. Somewhere in that anomaly, she's talking to Morrison, and we can't hear his side of the conversation. Rodriguez keyed his radio. All SAR units penetrate the anomaly. Find our pilot now. But 200 miles away, Morrison was already listening to a voice that would either save his life or end it. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison had stopped trusting his instruments 20 minutes ago. His altimeter claimed he was at 8,000 feet and climbing, but the air pressure in his cockpit told a different story. His fuel gauge flickered between full and empty like a broken clock. The compass spun lazily in circles, pointing everywhere and nowhere. He was flying blind in a perfectly clear sky. Morrison had run through every emergency protocol he knew. He'd reset circuit breakers, switched to backup systems, even tried rebooting the entire avionics suite. Nothing worked. The Super Hornet's fly-by-wire controls still responded to his stick inputs, thank God for manual hydraulics, but every electronic system that told him where he was, how high he was, or how much fuel he had left was lying to him. The Pacific stretched below, vast and indifferent. He'd been heading roughly southwest when his instruments failed, trying to return to the carrier using dead reckoning and the position of the sun. But without accurate airspeed, altitude, or fuel readings, he was essentially guessing. The cockpit temperature had dropped 15 degrees. Ice crystals formed on the inside of his canopy at the edges, which made no sense at his supposed altitude. His skin prickled with static electricity, and the hair on his arms stood up beneath his flight suit. Something was very wrong with the air around him. Morrison checked his watch, the only instrument he trusted anymore. 47 minutes since his radio died. At normal fuel consumption, he should have maybe 20 minutes left, but his fuel gauge was useless, so he could have 5 minutes or 50. No way to know. He was preparing mentally for ejection, reviewing water survival procedures. Checking his emergency beacon was still attached to his vest when his helmet speakers hissed to life. Morrison's heart nearly stopped. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, my name is Dr. Elena Vasquez. The voice was clear, crystal clear, clearer than any radio transmission had a right to be. Female with a slight accent he couldn't quite place, maybe California, maybe Spanish in her background. Calm but urgent. Morrison's hand instinctively went to his radio controls, but they were still dead. The voice wasn't coming through his radio. It was coming through his helmet's internal speakers directly, which should be impossible unless. I know you can hear me, Commander. Your radio is non-functional, but I'm using a specialized frequency that can reach your helmet's emergency system. You don't need to respond. Just listen. Morrison's jaw clenched. Every instinct screamed this was wrong. Helmet emergency systems were closed circuit, designed to work even if all other systems failed. They couldn't receive external transmissions. It was a safety feature, not a communication device. Your aircraft has entered an electromagnetic anomaly, the woman continued. I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, oceanographer with the Pacific Explorer research vessel. We're directly below you, tracking the anomaly. Your instruments are giving you false readings because of intense electromagnetic interference. Morrison looked down. Ocean, just ocean, no ship. You can't see us yet because of your altitude and the atmospheric distortion the anomaly creates, but I can see you on our equipment. You're at 12,000 feet, not 8,000 as your altimeter shows. Your heading is 255 degrees. And your fuel. A pause. Commander, your fuel situation is critical. Your gauge is malfunctioning, but based on your flight time and known consumption rates, you have approximately 7 minutes of fuel remaining. 7 minutes. Morrison's mouth went dry. 7 minutes to decide whether to trust a voice that shouldn't exist, coming through a system that shouldn't receive it, from a ship he couldn't see. I need you to listen very carefully, Vasquez said, her voice taking on a harder edge. In 7 minutes, you'll be swimming in the Pacific. Your carrier is too far away. Your instruments will kill you if you trust them. I am your only option. Morrison's training warred with his instincts. Never trust unknown communications in hostile situations. Maintain radio discipline. Follow established protocols. But all his protocols assumed his instruments worked, assumed he could call for help, assumed he wasn't completely alone in a sky that had turned against him. "How do I know you're real?" Morrison finally spoke aloud, knowing his radio couldn't transmit but needing to voice the question anyway. As if she could hear him, and maybe she could, Vasquez responded immediately. "Because I'm the only voice you're hearing, Commander, and in 4 minutes you'll be making the decision to either trust me or trust your gauges. One of us is trying to save your life. The other is trying to kill you." Morrison's fuel warning light blazed red. Or was it? Could he trust even that? "Talk to me," he said to the empty cockpit. "If you're real, prove it." "Your name is Jake Morrison. Call sign SharE. You're stationed on the USS Ronald Reagan. This morning you ate scrambled eggs and toast in the officer's mess. You flew out at 5:47 hours on a routine reconnaissance patrol with your wingman, Lieutenant Melissa Torres. Call sign Viper. You separated from her 32 minutes ago. She's currently 70 miles northwest of your position, outside the anomaly, probably wondering why you vanished from her radar." Morrison's blood ran cold. That was all accurate, all of it. But that information could be obtained by anyone monitoring their communications if they could break military encryption. "Still not convinced?" Vasquez's voice held a hint of frustration. "Look at your left wing. You've got a maintenance panel that's slightly discolored from a hydraulic leak repair 3 weeks ago. Your crew chief's name is Martinez, and he's been complaining about requisition delays for replacement parts." Morrison looked. The panel was there, exactly as she described. That detail wouldn't be in any transmission. Someone would have to physically see his aircraft. "I'm tracking you with specialized imaging equipment that can see through the electromagnetic interference," Vasquez explained. "Equipment designed specifically to study these anomalies. Commander, we've been monitoring this electromagnetic field for 3 days. We know what it does to electronics. We know how it bends radio waves and disrupts navigation. And we know that right now, every instrument in your cockpit is useless except your eyes and your stick." Morrison's hands tightened on the flight controls. "What do you want me to do?" "First, kill your autopilot. Your computer is trying to correct for instrument errors that don't exist. It's fighting you, making micro-adjustments based on false data. Switch to full manual." Morrison hesitated only a second before flipping the autopilot switch. The control stick suddenly felt lighter in his hands, more responsive. "Good. Now your instruments say you're at 8,000 feet climbing. You're not. You're at 12,000 feet descending at roughly 200 feet per minute. The air pressure on your skin should tell you I'm right. It's cold up there, isn't it? Colder than 8,000 feet should be." She was right. The temperature, the pressure, it all matched higher altitude. "Bank 15 degrees starboard," Vasquez commanded. "Slowly. I'm going to guide you to a visual approach on my vessel." "I can't see any vessel," Morrison said, scanning the ocean below. "You will. The atmospheric distortion is clearing as you descend. Trust your eyes, not your instruments. Bank starboard now." Morrison pushed the stick right. The Hornet banked smoothly. Through breaks in what he'd thought was clear air, he suddenly noticed something, distortions, like heat shimmer on a summer road but in the sky. The anomaly was visible if you knew to look for it. "Descend to 10,000 feet. Rate of 500 feet per minute. Ignore what your altimeter tells you. I'll let you know when you're at altitude." Morrison pushed the stick forward. The nose dropped. Wind resistance increased. He was definitely descending, regardless of what his instruments claimed. "Commander, I need you to understand something," Vasquez said, her voice softer now. "Once you commit to this approach, you can't turn back. Your fuel won't allow it. You're either landing this aircraft on the water near my ship, or you're ejecting and hopping. We can fish you out before hypothermia sets in. Either way, you're coming down in the next few minutes." Morrison's training had covered water landings. They were dangerous, often fatal. The Super Hornet wasn't designed for it. The impact forces could kill him. The aircraft could cartwheel, break apart, sink in seconds. But ejection over open water had its own risks. Parachute malfunctions, drowning, injury on impact, sharks, exposure. At least if he stayed with the aircraft, he had some control. Through a break in the clouds below, Morrison glimpsed something. A white wake on dark blue water. A ship. Small, maybe 150 feet long, with what looked like unusual antenna arrays and equipment on deck. "I see you," Morrison breathed. "Then you see my deck lights," Vasquez replied. "I've arranged them in a cross pattern. That's your landing path. The vertical line points into our bow. You'll want to land parallel to that line, touching down just beyond where the lines intersect." Morrison stared at the tiny ship below. Landing a multi-million-dollar fighter jet on the ocean next to a research vessel, guided by a voice he'd met 4 minutes ago, based on instructions from equipment he'd never heard of. His fuel warning alarm screamed, real or false, no way to know. The ocean rushed closer. The ship's cross pattern of lights became clearer. He could see people on deck now, tiny figures watching his descent. "Commander," Vasquez said quietly, "I need you to commit. Are you landing this aircraft or are you punching out? Decide now." Morrison looked at his instruments one last time. The lying altimeter, the spinning compass, the useless fuel gauge. Then he looked at the ocean below, at the small ship with its cross of lights, at the wake that proved something real existed in this impossible situation. He'd trusted his instruments his entire career, but instruments could fail. Sometimes you had to trust the one voice cutting through the darkness. "I'm coming in," Morrison said. "Talk me through it." "Descend to 500 feet, reduce speed to 180 knots, and Commander." "Yeah." "Don't die. I've worked too hard to save you." Morrison pushed the throttle forward slightly, feeling the Super Hornet's engines respond. 500 feet. He was dropping into the anomaly's heart now, and the effect was disorienting. The air shimmered around him like heat waves, but it was cold, so cold that frost crept across his canopy in crystalline patterns. "Airspeed 180 knots, Vasquez's voice came through clearly, somehow cutting through interference that was scrambling every other electronic signal. "You're high and fast. Reduce throttle, increase descent rate to 800 feet per minute." Morrison complied, watching the ocean rush up to meet him. At this altitude, he could see the Pacific Explorer clearly now, a white research vessel bristling with equipment, antenna arrays, and what looked like makeshift lights arranged in the cross pattern Vasquez had described. The ship looked impossibly small, a toy boat on an endless blue table. "How are you tracking me?" Morrison asked, needing to understand. His pilot's mind couldn't let go of the technical impossibility of what was happening. "Ultra-low frequency sonar imaging combined with thermal tracking," Vasquez replied, her voice tight with concentration. "The electromagnetic field doesn't affect those frequencies. I can see your heat signature, your aircraft's size and position. It's like watching you on a very expensive, very experimental radar system that cost 3 years of research grants." Despite everything, Morrison almost smiled. "Expensive equipment you're using to save one dumb pilot." "You're not dumb, Commander. You're still flying, aren't you? Most pilots would have panicked and punched out by now. Descend to 300 feet. Level out." Morrison pulled back on the stick, leveling the aircraft. At 300 feet, he was low enough to see details on the research vessel, people moving on deck, equipment being secured, a clear area near the stern where the lights formed their cross. The wake behind the ship was white and straight. They were maintaining steady speed, giving him a stable reference point. His fuel warning alarm had been screaming for 2 minutes straight. Morrison had learned to tune it out, but it was a constant reminder that time was measured in seconds now, not minutes. "Commander, we need to talk about the landing," Vasquez said. "The Pacific isn't calm today. We've got 3-foot swells. You're going to have to time your touchdown between wave peaks." "Fantastic," Morrison muttered, as if this wasn't hard enough. "I'm going to count down the swells for you. When I say commit, you put her down. The nose needs to stay up to prevent cartwheeling. You want the tail to hit first, let the fuselage settle, then the nose. Like a carrier landing but without the arrestor cables or the steel deck. Or any margin for error." "That too," Vasquez admitted. "But you've done hundreds of carrier landings. This is just a carrier made of water that doesn't stay still." Morrison lined up with the cross pattern, reducing his speed further. At 150 knots, the Hornet felt sluggish, on the edge of a stall. He needed enough speed to maintain control but slow enough to survive impact. It was a razor's edge. "Talk to me about your position," Vasquez said. "I need verbal confirmation of what I'm seeing." "Lined up with your lights. Airspeed 150 knots, altitude 200 feet, rate of descent 400 feet per minute." Morrison's voice was steady, falling into the mechanical rhythm of approach callouts he'd done thousands of times. "Perfect. You're going to pass over my ship at 50 feet, then touch down approximately 200 yards beyond our stern. That gives you enough water to settle without hitting us if something goes wrong." "When something goes wrong," Morrison corrected. "Optimism, Commander. Reduce speed to 130 knots. You're coming in too fast." Morrison pulled the throttle back further. The Hornet shuddered slightly, warning him of approaching stall speed. Every instinct screamed this was wrong, too slow, too low, too dangerous. But his instruments were useless, and Vasquez was all he had. The ship was directly below him now. He could see faces looking up, 6, maybe 7 people on deck. A woman in a blue jacket stood at the stern, one hand raised, and Morrison knew instinctively that was Vasquez. She wasn't looking at instruments in some warm cabin. She was outside, exposed to the elements, watching him with her own eyes. "Speed 130, Morrison called. 50 feet over your deck." "Confirmed. You're lined up perfectly. In 10 seconds you'll be over open water. Start your flare." Morrison passed over the Pacific Explorer with yards to spare. The ship's antenna arrays flashed beneath him. Then he was past, over nothing but ocean and 3-foot swells that looked like mountains from 50 feet up. "Begin flare now, nose up, throttle to idle." Morrison pulled back on the stick, raising the Hornet's nose. The aircraft slowed, settling into the air like a bird coming to roost. But this bird was 30 feet long and weighed 23,000 pounds. "You've got a swell coming in 5 seconds, Vasquez counted. 4, 3, wait for it. 2, commit now." Morrison cut the throttle completely. Gravity took over. The Super Hornet dropped like a stone, its tail section aimed at the ocean below. He kept the nose high, fighting every instinct that screamed to level out to save the aircraft to abort. The tail hit first. The impact was catastrophic. Morrison's body slammed forward against his harness hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. The world became a chaos of noise, shrieking metal, exploding water, systems failing in cascading electrical death. The tail section crumpled on impact. Water exploded over the canopy. The aircraft skipped once, twice, like a stone across a pond. Then the nose came down. Morrison had 1 second to appreciate that he'd timed it wrong. Nose too high, impact too hard, before the front landing gear assembly punched up through the fuselage floor, and the world went white with pain. The Hornet settled, but it was sinking fast. Water poured through a dozen ruptures in the hull. The cockpit filled with the smell of jet fuel and salt water. Morrison's vision swam. His left shoulder screamed with pain, dislocated, maybe broken. Blood ran down his face from somewhere above his right eye. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over. Canopy release. The mechanism groaned, jammed. Morrison hit it again, harder. Something gave. The canopy cracked open and the Pacific Ocean poured in like a frozen waterfall. The shock of cold water was like being electrocuted. Morrison gasped, swallowed seawater, choked. His harness release. Where was his harness release? His right hand found it, yanked. Nothing. The mechanism was jammed, bent from impact. The aircraft was sinking. Nose down now, tail up, sliding beneath the waves like a submarine in reverse. Water was up to Morrison's chest, rising fast. "Commander," Vasquez's voice screamed in his helmet. "Respond, are you out?" Morrison yanked at his harness with his good arm. The strap cut into his shoulder, trapped by twisted metal. The water reached his neck. He took a deep breath as it covered his mouth, his nose, still fighting the jammed release. The Super Hornet groaned one final time and slipped beneath the surface. Darkness closed over Morrison's head. The cockpit was a tomb of twisted metal and trapped air bubbles. He could see light above, the surface, salvation, life, but he was chained to a 30-ton anchor that was dragging him into the abyss. His lungs burned. His shoulder was white fire, but his right hand kept working the harness release, pulling, twisting, fighting. His vision started to tunnel. Black spots danced at the edges. This was it. He'd survived the landing only to drown in his own cockpit. Then something gave. The harness strap released with a snap he felt more than heard. Morrison kicked upward, pulling himself through the open canopy. His flight suit snagged on something. He twisted, tore free, kicked harder. His boots found the nose of the sinking Hornet and he pushed off, rocketing toward the light above. His head broke the surface. Morrison gasped, choked, gasped again. Air had never tasted so sweet. He was alive. Battered, bleeding, possibly badly injured, but alive. "Commander," real voices now, not through a helmet. Morrison turned in the water, his left arm useless at his side. The Pacific Explorer was maybe 50 yards away, a small inflatable boat racing toward him. Vasquez stood in the bow, life preserver in hand. Behind him, Morrison felt the pull of water being sucked down. He turned just in time to see his Super Hornet's tail fins disappear beneath the surface, trailing bubbles and jet fuel. $60 million sinking into 4,000 feet of Pacific Ocean. But Morrison didn't care about the aircraft. He was alive. Strong hands grabbed him, hauled him into the inflatable boat. Someone was talking, asking questions, checking his injuries. Morrison heard it all through a fog of pain and exhaustion. Then Vasquez's face appeared above him, framed by gray clouds and blue sky. She was younger than he'd imagined, maybe early 40s, with intense dark eyes and sun-weathered skin. "Welcome aboard the Pacific Explorer, Commander," she said, pressing a bandage against the cut above his eye. "You fly like hell, but you land like a drunk pelican." Morrison laughed, which hurt. Everything hurt. "You should see me on a good day." Above them, the sound of helicopter rotors cut through the air. The search and rescue had finally penetrated the anomaly. But Morrison was already home. The inflatable boat's motor screamed as it raced back toward the Pacific Explorer. Morrison lay in the bottom, wrapped in thermal blankets, his body shaking violently from a combination of shock, cold, and adrenaline crash. A young man with a thick beard, he looked barely old enough to shave, was pressing gauze against Morrison's head wound. "Stay with us, Commander," the bearded man said, his voice tight with concern. "You might have a concussion. Keep your eyes open." "Not planning on closing them," Morrison managed through chattering teeth. His left shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat. Dislocated for sure, maybe fractured. He'd felt the joint pop on impact. Dr. Elena Vasquez knelt beside him, one hand gripping the boat's side for stability, the other on his good shoulder. Up close, Morrison could see the strain on her face, deep lines around her eyes, a tension in her jaw that spoke of someone who'd been holding her breath for the last 10 minutes. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest," she said. "Can it be both?" Morrison's attempted smile turned into a grimace of pain. The inflatable bumped against the Pacific Explorer's hull. Hands reached down. The crew had lowered a boarding platform. They hauled Morrison up with practiced efficiency, careful of his injured shoulder. Someone had already prepared the ship's small medical bay. Morrison found himself on an examination table, surrounded by faces he didn't know but who just saved his life. "I'm Dr. Vasquez, but you already know that," the woman said, peeling off her wet jacket. Underneath, she wore a UC San Diego sweatshirt. "The nervous-looking one with the beard is Marcus Chen, my graduate student. The woman cutting off your flight suit is Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, our ship's medical officer. She's an MD, so you're in good hands." Dr. Okonkwo was already working with quick, efficient movements. Suspected left shoulder dislocation, possible clavicle fracture, head laceration, probable concussion, possible internal injuries from impact trauma. She looked at Morrison. "On a scale of 1 to 10, how's your pain?" 15, Morrison said honestly. "That's what I thought." She prepared a syringe. "This will help. Try not to move your shoulder." The medication hit Morrison's system within seconds, dulling the worst of the pain to a manageable roar. His shaking began to subside. Dr. Okonkwo worked on his head wound while Vasquez stood nearby, watching with an intensity that made Morrison think she was still analyzing data, even though her instruments were elsewhere. "How did you know?" Morrison asked, his voice stronger now. "How did you know exactly where I was, how to reach me?" Vasquez pulled up a stool, sitting at eye level with him. 3 days ago, we detected unusual electromagnetic readings from this location. Underwater volcanic vent releasing superheated, mineral-rich water creates ionized particles that build up in the atmosphere. Combined with unique magnetic properties of the seafloor here, it generates a localized electromagnetic field. "In English, please," Morrison said. "A bubble of electromagnetic chaos sitting on the ocean," Marcus interjected enthusiastically. "Everything electronic inside it goes haywire. GPS, radio, radar, all useless. We got trapped in it ourselves on day 1. Lost all communication with the outside world." Vasquez nodded. "We've been stuck here, watching the anomaly grow stronger. I knew it was only a matter of time before an aircraft flew into it. So I modified our deep-sea communication array. It uses ultra-low frequencies that can penetrate the interference. When you entered the field, your transponder sent out a final burst before dying. We picked it up." "You were monitoring military frequencies?" Morrison asked. "I was monitoring everything," Vasquez said unapologetically. "When you're trapped in an electromagnetic dead zone, you get creative. I've spent the last 72 hours jury-rigging equipment that wasn't designed to do what I needed it to do. The helmet communication breakthrough happened this morning. I figured out how to access emergency backup systems." Dr. Okonkwo finished bandaging Morrison's head. "I need to set that shoulder. This is going to hurt." "Worse than the landing." "Different kind of hurt." She was right. Even with the pain medication, the reduction of his shoulder joint was excruciating. Morrison gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to scream. Dr. Okonkwo counted to 3 and pulled. Something popped back into place with a sound that made Marcus turn away. The relief was immediate, though the ache remained. "Sling for 6 weeks minimum," Dr. Okonkwo said, fashioning an immobilizer. "You'll need X-rays when you get back to the carrier, but I don't think anything's broken. You're lucky." "Lucky?" Morrison repeated, almost laughing. He just crash-landed a fighter jet in the Pacific Ocean guided by a voice he'd met 10 minutes before his aircraft sank. Lucky wasn't the word he'd have chosen. Alive, maybe. Blessed, possibly. Completely insane, definitely. The ship's radio crackled suddenly, normal radio, not the exotic frequencies Vasquez had used. "Pacific Explorer, this is Navy Search and Rescue 1. We have you on visual. 1 mile out. Do you have Lieutenant Commander Morrison?" Vasquez grabbed the microphone. "SAR 1, this is Pacific Explorer. We have your pilot. He's banged up but stable. Be advised you're approaching the edge of an electromagnetic anomaly. Your instruments may malfunction. Copy that, Pacific Explorer. We experienced interference earlier. Instruments are stable now. Permission to approach and retrieve our pilot. Morrison pushed himself to sitting, ignoring Dr. Okonkwo's protests. Through the porthole, he could see the Seahawk helicopter approaching, Patterson at the controls. His rescuers had finally found him, but they were 40 minutes too late. The real rescue had come from an oceanographer with modified equipment and more courage than sense. SharE 1, stand by, Vasquez said into the radio. She looked at Morrison. You're in no shape to be winched up to a helicopter. Dr. Okonkwo wants to monitor you for at least another hour. The Navy will want me back immediately, Morrison said, though part of him wanted to stay, to understand this impossible situation better. The Navy can wait 60 minutes. You've got a head injury. Rushing you into a helicopter extraction could make it worse. Vasquez's tone left no room for argument. Morrison found himself nodding. She was right. Besides, his body felt like it had been used as a punching bag. The thought of being hoisted 50 feet on a cable made his stomach turn. SharE 1, our medical officer recommends delaying extraction for 1 hour to monitor the patient's condition, Vasquez transmitted. Will you maintain position? There was a pause, then Captain Rodriguez's voice came through, transmitted from the helicopter. Commander Morrison, what's your status? Morrison took the microphone Vasquez offered. Captain, I'm alive thanks to the Pacific Explorer crew. Shoulder injury, head laceration, possible concussion. I concur with Dr. Okonkwo's recommendation to delay extraction. Another pause. Morrison could imagine the debate happening on the carrier's bridge. Finally, Rodriguez responded. Copy that, Commander. SharE 1 will maintain observation position. Pacific Explorer, the USS Ronald Reagan thanks you for the rescue of our pilot. We'll be conducting a full investigation of the electromagnetic anomaly you reported. We have 3 days of data we'd be happy to share, Captain, Vasquez said. We'll send a team, stand by. The radio clicked off. Vasquez set down the microphone and looked at Morrison with an expression somewhere between relief and exhaustion. You know what the worst part was? What? Watching you hit the water, seeing your aircraft sink and not knowing if you'd gotten out. Those 30 seconds before you surfaced. She trailed off, shaking her head. Morrison understood. She'd guided him down, saved his life from a distance, but in that final moment, she'd been as helpless as anyone watching a disaster unfold. I got stuck on my harness, thought I was done for. But you weren't. Vasquez managed a tired smile. You fought your way out. I'm beginning to think Navy pilots are harder to kill than the Admiral's claim. Marcus appeared with coffee, real coffee, hot and strong. Morrison accepted it gratefully with his good hand. Through the porthole, he watched the Seahawk helicopter hovering at a respectful distance, Patterson keeping station. On the horizon, he could see another helicopter approaching, probably carrying the investigation team Rodriguez mentioned. The Pacific Explorer rocked gently on the swells. Morrison's Super Hornet was gone, somewhere at the bottom of the ocean, but he was alive, drinking coffee on a research vessel with the woman who'd talked him through the impossible. Dr. Vasquez, Morrison said quietly, thank you for everything, for the risk you took, the equipment you modified, for being exactly where I needed you to be. She met his eyes. Call me Alina, and you're welcome, Jake, though next time you decide to fall out of the sky, maybe pick somewhere with better cell phone reception. Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the knowledge that he'd just destroyed a $60 million aircraft, Morrison laughed. He was alive. That was enough. An hour later, Morrison sat in the Pacific Explorer's cramped laboratory, surrounded by screens displaying data that looked more like abstract art than science. His shoulder was immobilized, his head wrapped in professional bandaging, and he'd consumed enough coffee to fuel a small aircraft carrier. Dr. Okonkwo had cleared him for helicopter extraction, but Morrison had asked for 15 more minutes. He needed to understand what had almost killed him. Elena Vasquez stood at her main console, pulling up 3 days of accumulated data. Marcus Chen hovered nearby, occasionally adding enthusiastic commentary. The laboratory was a testament to improvisation, equipment jury-rigged with duct tape and zip ties, cables running in chaotic loops across the floor, and at least 6 laptops displaying different data streams simultaneously. "This is the electromagnetic field strength over the last 72 hours, Vasquez said, pointing to a graph that looked like a mountain range. "See how it builds? The underwater volcanic vent is releasing pulses of superheated water containing dissolved metallic compounds, primarily iron and copper oxides. When it hits the cold ocean water, it creates a supersaturated cloud of ionized particles." Morrison leaned forward, studying the graph. "And that's what killed my electronics." "Not just killed, confused them. Your instruments were receiving electromagnetic noise that your flight computer tried to interpret as legitimate data. Your altimeter thought you were climbing because the field was denser below you. Your compass spun because the local magnetic field was stronger than Earth's natural field. Your GPS couldn't get satellite signals through the interference." Marcus pulled up another screen. "But here's the really cool part. The anomaly creates a kind of electromagnetic lens. Radio waves entering from outside get bent, refracted, sometimes completely blocked. It's why the carrier couldn't see you on radar, why your radio went dead. You were invisible." "Then how did you reach me?" Morrison asked. Vasquez smiled, the expression transforming her tired face. 6 years of research into deep-sea volcanic communication systems. When you're studying vents 3 miles underwater, normal radio doesn't work. I developed ultra-low frequency arrays that can penetrate rock, water, electromagnetic interference, anything. The technology was designed to talk to submarines and deep-sea equipment. She gestured to a bizarre-looking antenna array visible through the porthole. "That's my baby. Cost 3 years of grant money and nearly got me laughed out of 2 academic conferences. Everyone said it was too experimental, too unreliable. But when you flew into my anomaly, it was the only thing that worked." Morrison looked at the antenna with new respect. "You weaponized oceanographic research equipment." "I prefer creatively repurposed," Vasquez corrected, "though accessing your helmet's emergency system required some. Let's call it aggressive signal penetration. I had to override about 6 safety protocols and jury-rig a frequency modulator from spare parts. Pretty sure I violated several FCC regulations." "You saved my life," Morrison said. "I think the FCC will forgive you." The door to the laboratory opened. Lieutenant Harris entered, followed by 2 Navy technicians carrying equipment cases. The investigation team had arrived. Harris's eyes went immediately to Morrison. "Commander, good to see you alive." Harris extended his hand, which Morrison shook with his good arm. "Captain Rodriguez sends his regards and orders you to stop scaring the communications team. Tell Petty Officer Chen I apologize for the heart attack." Harris turned to Vasquez. "Dr. Vasquez, I'm Lieutenant Harris, Naval Intelligence. We need to discuss this electromagnetic anomaly. Everything about it, how it formed, why we didn't detect it, and how it accessed our encrypted communications." Vasquez gestured to her screens. "I have 3 days of continuous data. Pull up a chair." For the next 30 minutes, Vasquez walked Harris and his team through everything. The underwater volcanic vent, the ionized particle cloud, the electromagnetic field strength measurements, the communication breakthrough that had saved Morrison's life. Harris took notes, asked sharp questions, and occasionally looked at his technicians, who were recording everything. "This is unprecedented," Harris said finally. "We have protocols for solar flares, electromagnetic pulses, even nuclear detonation effects. But localized oceanic electromagnetic anomalies, Nothing in our threat assessment covers this. That's because it's incredibly rare, Vasquez explained. You need the perfect combination: underwater volcanic activity, specific mineral content in the water, unique magnetic properties of the seafloor. I've been studying submarine volcanism for 15 years and never seen conditions align like this before. One of the technicians looked up from his laptop. "Lieutenant, the data checks out. These electromagnetic readings are consistent with what our search helicopters experienced. SharE-1 reported complete instrument failure at the coordinates Dr. Vasquez indicated." "Can you predict when and where these anomalies will occur?" Harris asked. Vasquez shook her head. "Not with current technology, but I can monitor them once they form. The real question is whether the Navy wants to invest in detection systems." Harris considered this. "After today, I guarantee the admirals will want every piece of detection equipment you can design. An electromagnetic field that can make our aircraft invisible and knock out our communications. That's not just a scientific curiosity, it's a strategic vulnerability." Morrison listened to the conversation, watching Vasquez transform from the exhausted rescuer into a confident scientist defending her research. She answered every question with precision, backed every claim with data, and never once oversold her capabilities. Harris was clearly impressed. "Dr. Vasquez, the Navy will want to debrief you extensively," Harris said. "We'll need all your data, your equipment specifications, and your methodology. We'll also need you to testify at the investigation board regarding Commander Morrison's incident." "I understand, but Lieutenant, I want something in return." Vasquez's voice turned firm. "This research has been chronically underfunded. I've been fighting for grants for 6 years while people told me I was chasing ghosts. Today proved I wasn't. I want the Navy to seriously consider funding further electromagnetic anomaly research." Harris almost smiled. "Doctor, after you saved one of our pilots using equipment you built with grant money and duct tape, I think you'll have admirals lining up to fund your research, though they'll probably want the technology classified. As long as I can publish the scientific findings, we can negotiate the rest." Morrison caught Harris's eye. "Lieutenant, put me on record. Dr. Vasquez's equipment and expertise saved my life. Without her modifications to deep-sea communication systems, I'd be at the bottom of the Pacific. The Navy needs this technology." "Noted, Commander, your testimony will carry weight." Harris closed his laptop. "Dr. Vasquez, expect a visit from DARPA within the week. They're going to love this." Through the porthole, Morrison saw a larger helicopter approaching. A CH-53C Stallion capable of evacuating both him and the investigation team. His time on the Pacific Explorer was ending. Vasquez saw it too. "Looks like your ride is here." Morrison stood carefully, testing his balance. The pain medication was wearing off, and his shoulder throbbed with renewed intensity. "Elena, I owe you more than thanks. You risked your research, possibly your career, modifying equipment in ways it wasn't designed for, all to save someone you'd never met." "You're a human being who needed help," Vasquez said simply. "That's all the reason I needed. Still, if you ever need a favor, anything, you call me." Morrison pulled a waterproof card from his flight suit pocket with his good hand. "My personal number, I mean it." Vasquez accepted the card, studying it. "A Navy pilot's personal number. I'll probably use this to ask about electromagnetic shielding in fighter jets." "I'd expect nothing less." Dr. Okonkwo appeared with Morrison's medical report sealed in a plastic envelope. "For the carrier's medical team. And Commander, take it easy on that shoulder. You're grounded for at least 6 weeks." "6 weeks of paperwork," Morrison groaned. "That might be worse than the crash." The Sea Stallion's rotors thundered overhead as it took position. A rescue swimmer descended on a cable, followed by a basket stretcher. Despite Morrison's protests that he could climb a ladder, Dr. Okonkwo and the rescue swimmer insisted on the stretcher for safety. As they strapped him in, Morrison looked at Vasquez one last time. "The world needs more scientists like you, people who don't just study problems, they solve them. And the world needs more pilots who trust impossible voices when their instruments fail," Vasquez replied. "Fair skis, Commander." "Calm seas, Doctor." The cable lifted Morrison toward the hovering helicopter. Below, the Pacific Explorer grew smaller, Vasquez a tiny figure on the deck waving up at him. Morrison watched until the ship disappeared from view, swallowed by the vast Pacific. But he knew he'd see her again. Some connections, forged in electromagnetic anomalies and impossible rescues, didn't fade easily. 3 months later, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison stood in the auditorium of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in San Diego, his left arm finally free of its sling. The room was packed, naval officers in dress uniforms, civilian scientists, graduate students, and a surprising number of media representatives. At the podium, Elena Vasquez was presenting her findings on electromagnetic anomalies caused by submarine volcanic activity. Morrison had been officially grounded for 8 weeks. The Navy's investigation board had spent 6 days reviewing every detail of his incident: the instrument failure, the mysterious communications, the emergency water landing, and the loss of a $60 million Super Hornet. Morrison had testified for 11 hours, walking them through every decision, every second of that impossible flight. The board's conclusion had been unanimous: no pilot error, equipment failure due to unprecedented natural phenomena, commendation for emergency landing procedures under extreme conditions, and a recommendation that all naval aviators receive training on electromagnetic anomaly recognition and response. Morrison's shoulder had healed cleanly. Dr. Okonkwo's field diagnosis had been accurate, dislocated but not fractured. 6 weeks of physical therapy and he was cleared to fly again. His first flight back had been bittersweet. The cockpit felt different now. He trusted his instruments, but he'd learned they could lie. That knowledge changed everything. Vasquez advanced her presentation slide, showing the electromagnetic field data that had nearly killed him. "The anomaly persisted for 5 days before dissipating," she explained to the audience. "During that time, we documented continuous electromagnetic interference strong enough to disable aircraft electronics within a 3-mile radius." Morrison watched her command the room with the same calm authority she'd used to talk him through his descent. She'd changed in 3 months, more confident, better funded, and suddenly famous in both scientific and military circles. The Navy had awarded her a research contract worth $4.2 million. DARPA had made her a consultant. 3 universities had tried to recruit her away from Scripps. She turned them all down. The Pacific Explorer was her home. The modified ultra-low-frequency communication array proved effective at penetrating the electromagnetic interference, Vasquez continued. "We successfully established communication with Lieutenant Commander Morrison when all conventional systems had failed. This technology has applications beyond anomaly rescue, submarine communication, deep-sea research, emergency response in electromagnetically hostile environments." Admiral Keating, seated in the front row, nodded approvingly. Morrison had met with Keating twice since the incident. The Admiral had been blunt. "You survived because a civilian scientist was better prepared than the United States Navy. That's unacceptable. We're fixing it." The fix had been comprehensive. The Navy had established the Electromagnetic Anomaly Detection and Response Program, with Vasquez as lead scientific consultant. They deployed monitoring buoys across the Pacific, equipped with her detection technology. 3 research vessels were being retrofitted with her communication arrays. A new training program for pilots covered recognition of instrument failure patterns consistent with electromagnetic interference. Morrison had helped design that training program. He'd spent hours with instructors, walking them through exactly what he'd experienced: The simultaneous failure, the contradictory readings, the static electricity, the temperature drop. Trust your body over your instruments, he told classes of wide-eyed pilots. Your skin knows the temperature. Your inner ear knows your orientation. If everything electronic is screaming one thing and your body is telling you another, consider the possibility that nature is lying to your machines. Vasquez finished her presentation to enthusiastic applause. The question and answer session ran 20 minutes over schedule, with scientists peppering her with technical questions and Navy officers asking about operational applications. Morrison watched her handle both groups with equal skill, translating complex oceanographic concepts into terms everyone could understand. When the session finally ended, Morrison made his way through the crowd toward the podium. Vasquez saw him coming and smiled, excusing herself from a cluster of graduate students. "Commander Morrison, still in one piece, I see." "Thanks to you," Morrison said. "Good presentation, though you undersold the part where you saved my life using equipment held together with hope and zip ties." "Academic humility," Vasquez said with a grin. "Besides, the zip ties were high quality." They walked together toward the reception area, where coffee and refreshments had been laid out. Morrison noticed Admiral Keating approaching, along with a woman Morrison recognized from the news, Dr. Sarah Chen, director of the National Science Foundation. "Dr. Vasquez, Commander Morrison," Keating said. "Dr. Chen wanted to meet you both." Handshakes were exchanged. Dr. Chen looked between them with interest. "I've read all the reports, but I wanted to hear it from you directly. Dr. Vasquez, you modified research equipment in real time to penetrate military-grade communications." "The emergency system wasn't actually military-grade," Vasquez explained. "It was a backup channel designed for exactly this kind of situation when all other systems fail. I just found a way to access it." "With equipment you designed for talking to submarines," Chen said admiringly. "The NSF is very interested in your work. We'd like to fund a comprehensive study of oceanic electromagnetic phenomena." Vasquez's eyes lit up. Morrison had learned that look meant someone was about to get a detailed explanation, whether they wanted one or not. Admiral Keating turned to Morrison. "Commander, your return to flight evaluation is next week. How's the shoulder?" 100%, sir. Ready to get back in the cockpit." "Good, because we're assigning you as military liaison to Dr. Vasquez's research program. You'll be working together on protocol development." Morrison looked at Vasquez, who seemed equally surprised. "Together?" "You understand her technology. She understands your operational needs. It's a logical partnership." Keating's expression suggested this wasn't a request. "Besides, you owe her a Super Hornet. Might as well work off the debt." After the Admiral and Dr. Chen moved on, Morrison and Vasquez stood together, processing the news. "Working together," Vasquez said thoughtfully, "that could be interesting." "Or disastrous," Morrison countered. "You're a scientist who takes risks. I'm a pilot who's supposed to follow regulations. You trusted a mysterious voice and crash-landed a fighter jet in the ocean. I think you're more flexible than you admit." Morrison couldn't argue with that. They moved to a quieter corner of the reception, away from the crowds. Through the windows, Morrison could see the Pacific Ocean stretching to the horizon, the same ocean that had nearly killed him, the same ocean that had brought them together. "Thank you again," Morrison said quietly. "Not just for saving my life, but for proving that sometimes the impossible is just science we haven't figured out yet." Vasquez smiled. "And thank you for trusting me, for hearing that voice cutting through your static and choosing to believe it. Best decision I ever made." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the waves. Somewhere out there, Morrison's Super Hornet rested on the ocean floor, 4,000 feet down. But he was here, alive, starting a new chapter that combined his flying expertise with Vasquez's groundbreaking research. The electromagnetic anomaly had changed everything. It had revealed vulnerabilities in naval aviation. It had validated years of Vasquez's underappreciated research. It had created new protocols, new technology, new partnerships. But most importantly, it had proven that when systems fail and darkness closes in, sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected source. A voice cutting through the silence, calm and certain, calling your name when you need it most. Morrison raised his coffee cup in a quiet toast to electromagnetic anomalies and the scientists who study them. Vasquez clinked her cup against his, to pilots who trust their instincts and land the impossible. Outside, the Pacific rolled on, vast and mysterious, holding secrets that science was only beginning to understand. And somewhere in that endless blue, two people who'd met in an impossible moment prepared to explore those mysteries together. The radio had fallen silent over the ocean, but the voice that had cut through, calling Navy pilot SharE, had changed two lives forever.
Servirà più spinta. Però ho capito, calma, calma, ho capito. Allora, mi trastate? Non sto lurkando, adesso no. No, adesso no. No? Allora, qui. Con me, tu. Vieni, cucciolo. Sì, sei bello, sai. Sì. Vai. Fai il tuo lavoro. Stai qui. Qui. Vadi. Ok. Ancora un po'. Adesso. Perfetto. Vieni con me. Vieni tesoro. Ti metti qui. Mettiti qui così. No, mettiti bene. Così.